Hey YouTube, Abby's video. In today's video, we'll be talking about the easiest to hardest to play tank in Overwatch 2. Let's not waste any time and get straight into it. Starting us off, it's going to be Orisa. Now, Orisa is by far one of the easiest tanks to play, very easy to execute, very easy to understand the cooldown rotation, and honestly, she kind of just kind of plays for herself. There's not much of micromanagement or things that you need to keep a track of other than the bare minimum of her weapon, but even that is really, really forgiving in team fights and things like that. That if you just stop using it for 1 second, it's back to its good state and it won't overheat. Orsa's cooldown rotation is some variation of her shift going into E, going into javelin, and some variation between that. The cooldowns are really, really closely knit together to the point that when you cycle between one, the other one comes online, and then the next one comes online after that previous one, allowing Orisa's survivability to feel really, really strong. And especially given the fact that healing is still really strong in the game, Orisa can feel very, very good to play with pretty much any support. Optimally, she does kind of want BAP and Iliari with her, or BAP Zen, or even BAP Lifeweaver, but she kind of fits in with anybody as long as both of them can do high heals. Orisa can be very easy to play. You can run her into any tank. She doesn't necessarily have any bad matchups other than Zarya. Rest of the tanks do have a hard time up against her. If you know how to play her into other characters, and where to be and how to just pressure those tanks, she can really feel like she can take over the game, and she's very easy to play comparatively to the other tanks, right? So there you go. Orisa is in easy. Doomfist is by far one of the hardest tanks to play in the game. He is not easy. It is not easy to pick him up. A lot of Doomfist players have the wrong idea of how to play him. Um, you really, really have to understand where to be, why you're there, what you're supposed to do, how to bait out cooldowns, when to take a proper full power engagement with empowered punch. There's so much micromanagement that needs to happen, so much of the movement control. And on that same note, while I'm at it, I'm gonna put another character up here with him, is Wrecking Ball. I will say Wrecking Ball's window is he's just a little bit more forgiving when it comes to Doomfist, so I will put Doomfist above him. The difference isn't that much; it's a little bit, but at the moment, Wrecking Ball does find it harder to find value compared to Doomfist because of the way supports are. So until supports get kind of like adjusted or changed from different, like the perspectives that we've talked about before, Wrecking Ball and Doomfist, especially with the new nerf that came through for his punches, they're really hard to play and they really don't bring as much value as any of the other tanks could bring with the amount of commitment and resources that they require to bring that value. I hope I'm making sense. This is one of those things where I wish I kind of had footage to explain these things, and it goes into like so much depth of why Wrecking Ball and Doom, despite how hard they are to play, the value that they bring is very, very bare minimum. We classify them as a new thing now. We classify them as these disruption tanks. Their job is to kind of disrupt playstyles, disrupt cooldown usages, etc., etc. Hope to survive those engagements where they did cause disruption, and then bring forth some form of pressure, right? On paper, they're both dive tanks, but playing them in that traditional dive playstyle more often than not just gets both their HP bars burnt out. Doom kind of has to balance this playstyle between dive and brawl, and Wrecking Ball just has to like apply pressure, leave, come back quickly before they focus your team, and just keep that up. And on both tanks, you have to be super, super fast to be able to bring any value, and most importantly, make sure that the enemy eyes remain on you and not your team. Because the easiest thing to do against a Doomfist and Wrecking Ball is just ignore them and just if especially if you're playing tank. Let's say I'm Ramatra, they got Doom, they have Wrecking Ball. I can just ignore it and run his team down with my team. Like we just outpace those two characters, right? And they don't have the damage output to try and pressure us in return. Doomfist really needs empowered punch to be able to do anything, and Wrecking Ball has like one slam combo, and after that, for about 10 plus seconds, he's kind of like just there. So that's the window for you to kind of go and do whatever you want. So when it comes to the hardest tanks to play, Doomfist and Wrecking Ball, very hard to play, very hard to manage the cooldowns and understand how to use them, etc., etc. Not as easy as something like Orisa, right? So definitely Doom and Wrecking Ball, the hardest characters to play. I can go on about them for a while, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Really hard to play because cooldown management, landing shots with them, the amount of stuff in the game that can counter them, etc., etc. It's just if you're not good at the character, if you don't understand how to really push him to the limit, both of them, both him and Hammond, they're very hard to play. This brings us to the next character, Junker Queen. Now, originally, I did want to put Junker Queen in hard because she's very mechanically demanding with almost all her abilities. But honestly, I'm going to put her in mid, probably at the highest of medium and just below hard, because while she is very mechanically demanding, getting the hang of her, she just feels like a Overwatch 2 version of what Roadhog could have been. With the She does have that same combo to pull people close to her. She relies a lot on her negative status effects and things like that. Overall, her kit is relatively simple and straightforward. Once you kind of mess around with it, you know what the character wants to do. And again, it's like, it's a shooter game. We have to have mechanical skill expressions somewhere, and Jungle Queen is a great character of that. If your mechanics are bad with her, you're going to be bad with her. If your mechanics are good with her, you're going to take over lobbies with her really, really well. And unless there's a good well, any tank can deal with Junker Queen. They just have to understand how to punish you in between those windows of commanding shout being gone. So Junker Queen, very fair, very honest character. Um, has a good skill ceiling and skill floor. So I'm gonna put it at the highest of mid tier. I don't want to put it in hard because those two tanks are on a completely different level. So I will put her at the top of medium tier for now. Zarya. So it's the funny thing about Zarya, and people might not agree with it, but honestly, Zarya is very easy. I don't want to put her on that same level of Orisa, but like playing Zarya now in a 5v5 setting really is just kind of okay, I'm pressuring the enemy front line. If I take damage, I bubble, and then like of course like you can use bubbles to deny certain cooldowns, cleanse your teammates, also some other things. But the baseline playstyle of understanding how to get good at Zarya and do your own thing is to just develop a selfish playstyle. I take damage, I bubble, I get charged up, I mow people down, I grab when two or three people are grouped up, I eliminate them, I move on with my life. So from that perspective, I do kind of have to say Zarya can feel very easy to play. It's really easy to manage her bubble cooldowns as well, and she's very, very strong. She's really not that like overly complex to get a hold of. She does have a little bunny hop tech and some other things going for her that give her a little bit more skill ceiling, but honestly, in terms of execution comparatively to other characters, she is relatively easy and even sometimes forgiving to play, again, compared to the characters above her, right? So this is like a very comparative list, and she's not as easy as Orisa because you do have to have good game awareness of what's going on around you, how you can counter and set up stuff. But overall, she is relatively easy to play and not that hard to play. And especially like as you get rewarded for absorbing damage, your beam gets bigger, so it becomes more forgiving to use, and it's really, really easy to trace and melt people with her. So Zarya, I would say easy to play. If somebody disagrees with that, it's okay. I understand, right? Reinhardt, medium, right behind Junker Queen. Reinhardt actually Reinhardt can feel a little bit more difficult to play. I mean, honestly, both him and Jungle Queen are on the same level because there's so much stuff that can disrupt them, especially from the support role. There's so much options in the damage role that just completely shuts them down that they don't have a response to. If you get walled by Mei, you're kind of screwed more often than not. But with Reinhardt, you do have to manage the shield. Earth Shatter can feel more difficult to use than Jungle Queen's ult, in my personal opinion. Especially given the mobility creep, the healing creep, and all sorts of other stuff with how strong tanks can be. Reinhardt can feel comparatively harder to play compared to Jungle Queen. Now, mechanics wise, of course not. If it came down to mechanics, Jungle Queen is definitely hard to play. But overall ability interaction and things like that, maybe Ryan's a little bit harder to play, but I will say that there are windows where it is easier to play Ryan, and in the matchup, even against Jungle Queen, Ryan is a lot easier to play. I will say Ryan is the perfect definition of mid. He's not too hard to play, not too easy to play. Understanding how to manage your shield dancing and resources in the way that you can use your shifts and your fire strikes is very important. Um, but he's overall not that hard to play. Like he is hard to play in the sense that there's so much stuff that pressures Ryan, can melt his shield, can just make you feel useless. But in terms of picking the character up, getting good at the character, understanding how to play mind games with him and things like that, yeah, he's pretty medium. Like he's with Junker Queen. They're on that same level. And that brings us to Winston. And I do kind of want to put Winston in hard, but I also think Winston is medium. Like Actually, if we take into account Winston's primal rage, and if we want to talk about maximizing value, then primal rage, using the primal rage effectively and not like burning 1000 HP bar and feeding 1000 HP bar worth of oh my goodness, feeding 1000 HP to the enemy worth of ult charge. There's so many Winstons that do that, and really the skill ceiling for Winston comes in the moment primal rage is a thing that you can use. Now we know the nicknames Primal Blade, 𝐒𝐿𝐊𝐒. There's a professional player called 𝐒𝐿𝐊𝒒 who is fantastic with Winston's primal rages, and really the skill ceiling for Winston players when it comes to how they use primal rage is really high, because you can have a Winston player that will always find a way to get a 2k with primal rage, and then you have Winston players that are just hopping around burning their HP bar. So the baseline concept of picking up Winston and understanding what he's supposed to do is not that difficult. Positioning with him can feel very, very rough. Lots of Winston players just think that nowadays he still has a 2016 playstyle of just jumping into the enemy backline, but that's not how it works. With the way support is now, you are trying more to use your jumps to confirm kills or chase targets, and not necessarily, you know, uh, do a hard dive. Like, unless you know that your team is going to follow up on the hard dive and somebody is isolated and cannot be rescued, then for sure you do go for those playstyles. Those are some things that you identify in a match that, yeah, this is a safe dive to commit to. It still works against, isolated DPS characters really well, since they don't have that much utility going for themselves. So Winston, on paper he seems very easy to play with what you have to do, but when you account for everything in the game, again, comparatively to other tanks and things like that, he does have it pretty hard right now. I will say that he's a pretty good tank. He is not as bad as a lot of people make him out to be, but in terms of maximizing value with Winston, it can feel really, really hard to play. Not mechanically challenging from baseline Winston kit gameplay perspective of hopping, shield dancing, and all that. It just takes a little bit of practice and you get used to it. But maximizing value of understanding where to be with Winston, how to use primal rage, etc., for sure, I would put him hard. Like, he's not as hard as getting value as Doom and Ball, but he's definitely hard to play. This brings us to Roadhog, and Roadhog has it really, really rough lately, and I kind of did want to wait for the patch where he got his big rework, but honestly, I can't be bothered. So for now, I will say Roadhog is easy to play. I'm going to put him above Orisa, and it's just hook and cook combo. It's really not that difficult to execute. The character is very, very simple and straightforward. You just heal yourself with this button, you hook people, you can cook them with the combo, and just take some damage, use your healing to build up your ult quickly, and then use that whole hog to just either melt a tank that's in front of you, or boot people away to create space and continue that cycle. Really, really, the skill ceiling for hog is not that high. It just kind of comes down to mechanics. And as we know in Overwatch, sometimes just because the character needs mechanics doesn't mean that you can hard carry games with them. He's a weaker Junker Queen, basically. Like, he doesn't have the versatility and utility that Queen kind of brings to herself with the bleed and commanding shout effects that really help enable her brawl-like playstyle. Roadhog is a lot more of a slower version of all of that. And he relies a lot more on his combo, right? Like, he relies so much more on his combos because of the way that his shotgun works, right? Junker Queen, she doesn't necessarily have a quote-unquote shotgun. She has like this mid-range shotgun that can, like, its max potential is in that mid-range, which is what enables her to be a good brawl tank. Hog doesn't have that. He kind of wants to be up in your face, and nowadays getting up in people's faces isn't the best thing going on, especially with how strong support is as a role. So Hog, he's easy to play, easy to pick up, easy to understand, very fun to play character, but he's not as hard as the characters above him, right? Like, there's a little bit more nuance and um, understanding the characters and timing things, and just so much more to the other characters that comparatively Hog is easy to play. I know there are a lot of Hog enthusiasts out there that will disagree, but come on, man, you go into these games and you only have one objective. I'm going to hook and cook and move on, right? Or just hook the enemy tank, melt it with my team, and move on. It really doesn't get any simpler than that. He is pretty relatively easy to play. There's some pills that we have to swallow, and I say this as somebody with a lot of hours on tank, because I mean, I have a lot of hours on this game in general. But I really love Roadhog, but I can't deny that when I want to play Roadhog, I just turn my brain off and I just want to hook and cook people, right? So it is what it is. Moving on to the next tank, we have Sigma. Now, Sigma is very interesting. He can unironically be put into any of these tiers, and all of them would make sense. So I'm going to put him at the king of medium difficulty. Sigma's graph spheres are definitely the most challenging part of his kit, simply because landing them to get max value from his damage can feel really difficult with how fast characters can be, and managing your positioning to stay in poke range, effective poke range, is very, very important. But other than that, cycling his cooldowns as well as using his cooldowns, I'm not going to lie, they're very forgiving. You throw the shield up, take a bit of damage, make sure the shield doesn't break, put it down. Now cycle to your, suck up the damage, convert it to HP bar. At this point, if you're still being pressured, pull up your rock, use the rock to, you know, uh, stun the person that's like pressuring you, boop them away, and keep, lobbing your grass spears into them. I will say the skill ceiling for his, why I put him like at the top of medium difficulty or whatever, is it can feel very, very difficult to execute his ultimate nowadays. Like his ultimate nowadays, again, because of support power creep and how much power they have with their button presses to turn things around, whether it's Kiriko's Suzu, Baptiste Lamp, or even a sleep dart from Ana to shut you down, utilizing Sigma Ultimate to get max value can feel very difficult. So for that purpose alone, Sigma will be in medium. He definitely has areas where the skill ceiling, you have to be good at the way that you're executing everything with him. But the rest of his kit, again, simple, straightforward, really easy to understand, and what you're supposed to do, right? So that's why Sigma is going to be at the top of medium, and that brings us to Ramatra. Now, Ramatra is very interesting. Actually, Ramatra is going to take the spot above Sigma, right? And the reason for that is Ramatra is really, again, one of those characters where it's okay. Actually, no, I think Ram is, people might disagree, but I think Ram is very easy to play. Is an even easier Reinhardt to play, and the way his whole kit works is, they like basically when you're in like your Sage form, that's what I call like the base form. When he's like not in the big Nemesis form, you just have to survive. Yeah, and, like the poke damage is kind of meh, but you can, if you get good at controlling it, it can do some stuff. It's not that effective, but it is nice to have. Um, but understanding the shield placement on how to use it to close the distance and then enter Nemesis form to do damage, he's really not that hard to play. Even his ultimate is just, it kind of plays for you. Like, okay, like just stay in the line of sight of these targets and it'll suck them off, and all you have to do is walk up and hold left click towards those targets. And the big zone of damage of the airwaves that he sends out is really, really forgiving. It's really not that hard to use. So man, I'm not going to lie, like Ram, I kind of want to put him in easy, but I will say that managing between like understanding that, okay, I'm going to swap back into the Sage form. I don't know why I call it that. I swear I cannot stop calling it that. Just bear with me. So the Omnic form and then the Nemesis form. Like, you do have to have a good understanding of how to balance those two things, but honestly, Ramatra is really not that hard to play. He's, again, one of those very simplistic brawl tanks of, okay, I'm in range, I enter this form, this is how I do damage. Oh, I'm being shot at, okay, I hold right click, I block the damage, and that's about it, really. His the Ravenous Vortex's job is to pull people down and lock them in zone, and honestly, it works like 10% of the time that you play him. Like maybe not even 5% of the time it'll actually do what it's meant to do, but it's just like an additional like grenade for you to create a damaging zone to help with breakpoints, more often than not, at least, right? And other than that, he's relatively simple. His shield is, you're not meant to use, like, yeah, you can use it sometimes to like block damage that's coming into a choke or whatever, but you're meant to place it in the area that you want to go. Reach that, let the shield tank the damage from that spot, reach that spot, enter Nemesis form, and just start punching away, right? And then just kind of like go from there and keep rotating that cooldown cycle of just, Omnic and Nemesis form. So I will not put Ram in easy, but I will put him in medium. However, uh, I don't know. Like, see, this is where we all have differing opinions, and obviously this list is based on my opinion. Before somebody gets like their mind in a twist that I can't believe this. He put like Doom and Hard and then put Ram here or whatever the case might be, right? It's very subjective, it's very opinion based. So if you guys, want to tell me your opinions on who do you think is hard, medium, easy, feel free. But I will put Ram behind uh Ryan, Queen, and Sigma, because compared to them and the other characters above them, he is easier to play. Like, I, in my personal opinion, cannot deny that he is easier to play. He's much easier to execute as well, and he's much more forgiving with what his kit allows him to do and the way his ultimate works as well, right? These characters, the ones above him, they don't have that leniency towards them. They kind of have to make sure they time and do things right. Ram can make a mistake with cooldown usage and still get away with it. So with that being said, that's it for my tank tier list video on who's the easiest to hardest to play tank. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Was I right about this? Was I wrong about this? I'm fairly sure if there's one thing for sure that I got right is Doom is the hardest, Orisa is the easiest. I am not having debates on this, right? I'm not having debates on this. I'm joking, we can debate it, but I don't mind. With that being said, if you guys want to support the channel for free, you can do that by hitting like and subscribe. It means the world to me. If you want to support the channel with finance and you want to help me out in a different way, you can use the super chat feature to donate some money. And we will have a Patreon and also some other stuff coming up soon in the coming week. Now, with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video.